Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Fantasy Pivot on rotocurve.com. We, of course, our show aim to teach the masses how to play this game of daily fantasy baseball, of which we love so much and we'll be taking a look at today. Don't forget to check out the free roll today. That is rotocurve.com/free roll. Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we got going on today?
Yeah, we have that RotoCurve free roll up on DraftKings. Of course, we've done. I believe this is the 20th week or 15th week in a row, something like that nature. Depending on NBA, depending on MLB, we've got a free roll pretty much every week for you. And we also have, for those of you that have not signed up on Fantasy Draft, you can get in on the Fantasy Draft's $15,000 GPP, and exclusive for RotoCurve members, you get a $22 refund if you join that GPP if you sign up tonight. Now, of course, for those of you that have already signed up for Fantasy Draft, of course, you do have an option to get those extra bonus prizes as well. It's up all over the site. If you go on rotocurve.com and click on the top banner, the details are in there for sure. So it's overlaying a bit right now. So be sure to get in and get your chance at free money and a chance for a big prize. That is a big GPP tonight on Fantasy Draft.
And in at the buzzer, we have our other host, Nick Mensio. Nick was stuck in traffic, but it looks like he cut his guys off. He drove like a Chicago driver, and guess what? He made it. So, Nick, what's going on?
What's up, guys? I don't want to be linked to Chicago after last night, man. Those Blues hurt me.
There you go. I'm not even a big hockey guy, but that was our talk of our town, is that double overtime win with Patty Kane. But for me, the big story was Jake Arrieta, man. He was awesome. And I guess let's just get started there. It's a Friday, so we'll have a lot of fun today. But, Josh, is it a lock that John Lester throws a no-hitter tonight to follow up with it? It is, right?
He's got to. I mean, Billy Hamilton's the only guy that doesn't have a chance to just not get on base, I guess, against Lester. But that's the one thing about that Reds lineup is he's not on base. And honestly, real quick, how is it that the Blackhawks win a playoff hockey game in 2 overtimes and everybody's talking about baseball? That must be how good Jake Arrieta is right now.
It's more me, honestly. I think if you were to look at the Chicago Facebook and the Chicago Twitter, it would be more of the Blackhawks, but I'm just not the world's biggest hockey fan. I never grew up playing it. In fact, here's a fun story. My parents wanted me to play it at 5 years old. They took me to one practice. I started crying, and I left practice after they had bought me all the materials. So little 5-year-old Ricky looked at the ice, cried his way off, and never played again. Which is weird because I found myself, my first internship ever was for the Indiana University hockey program. So it was weird how things came full circle. I did not cry my way off of that ice. I actually enjoyed my time there. But it's weird how things work. Let's get started, though. Really strange slate today because, again, we've got a lot of pitchers, and there's none to love, man. I mean, usually on these, you get like a Kershaw or you get a Scherzer, or you get someone in a great situation. And I think Felix Hernandez was the guy that most of us were on, and all of a sudden he's scratched with an illness. So there's a big drop off from him to Hisashi Iwakuma. So Josh, let's start with pitcher. I mean, what are we doing tonight? There's no one in a good spot.
Yeah, it was tough seeing that Felix Hernandez is not going to pitch tonight, of course, being scratched with that illness, as you just mentioned. It means Hisashi Iwakuma is pitching for the Angels. I know a lot of people will probably look towards him because he's going to be one of those guys that's low-owned, because let's face it, once Felix is off, a lot of people are just going to look away from the pitching in that game. But you have to remember that the Angels could not hit any one of the three of us if we were a right-handed pitcher in the majors right now. I believe their WOBA is something under like 260 or something, which is ridiculous. That's this year in a small sample, but last year they were bad as well. So it just tells you that a lot of people were going to be on Felix Hernandez tonight, especially for cash games. But now tonight, with him scratched, you're looking at a bunch of guys that all have the little bit of like what ifs, or maybe you're not fully comfortable. They don't check all the boxes. The first thing that should have came to everybody's mind when looking at matchups today, though, Adam Wainwright for the St. Louis Cardinals against the San Diego Padres out in San Diego and Petco Park. The problem is Wainwright's been brutal this year. I don't really say that lightly. He has an ERA over 8, a whip of almost 2, so 2 base runners per inning on average. The thing is, the Padres have been just as bad on offense against right-handed pitchers. So I do think Wainwright is an excellent option tonight in tournaments because he does face that Padres offense who was struck out over 27% of the time in limited samples this year. And the combined roster of the Padres from last year that's in the lineup for this particular evening had a combined WOBA of 280 and an isolated power rating of under like 120 or something like that. So this team really can't hit righties. The problem is Wainwright has not gotten anyone out. But something has to give, and I do think it's on the side of Wainwright tonight.
Yeah, so I was looking at Wainwright close earlier. I did a podcast for Fantasy Draft, and I went over the slate, and we were talking about Wainwright and why he's been so bad. And his fastball's down a mile an hour this year. From his prime, his swinging strike percentage outside the zone is down 2%, and this would be a career worst of swinging strikes inside the strike zone for him by 2%. So there's something going on with Wainwright, at least through a short sample size. His FIP and XFIP numbers are high along with his ERA, but if there is a magic elixir for even a pitcher who's throwing bad, to kind of fix himself, it is against the Padres. So he is interesting. If you really have watched him closely and you believe this is just nothing major, then he's an auto start, but there's risk like every other pitcher tonight. So Nick, who do you like at pitcher tonight? Are you on board with Wainwright being the St. Louis guy? You've probably watched him closer than any of us, and if not, who else do you like?
No, I'm not on Wainwright at all. Living here in St. Louis, I listen to a ton of sports talk radio, like local sports talk, 101 ESPN and all that stuff, and I was listening, and Wainwright was saying he had noticed 5 or 6 different things wrong with his mechanics so far to start the season. Come off that Achilles injury last season, they think he's tipping his pitches a little bit. So big league hitters are going to pick up on those kind of things. So I'm not gonna be on board with Wainwright until he figures this out. His 3.86 strikeouts per 9 is dead last in the majors. Would have been dead last in majors last season. I know it's a small sample, but I'm not about Wainwright at all tonight. And the Padres are swinging the bats a little bit better as of late.
Yeah, they only scored 1 last night, but before that they definitely were. Last night was just a complete beatdown. But outside of Wainwright, pitching is interesting tonight, so let's kind of get into what else you could do. If you're not going to use Wainwright on a one starting pitcher site, which I definitely wouldn't, Josh, let's go to you. My choice would be Gio Gonzalez, honestly. You think of this matchup against the Twins, and you look at them last year. They were a good hitting team against lefties, let's be honest. But Torrey Hunter retired. Trevor Plouffe was kind of one of their specialty guys against lefties. He went on the DL. That changes it drastically for me, their outlook. Brian Dozier kind of faded down the stretch. He finished with a WOBA of about 330, which is, nothing that we need to drastically worry about. I don't think this Twins team is nearly as good against lefties as they were last year, and Gio Gonzalez was a guy who I think his BABIP was highest among starting pitchers last year, so I think it's just a natural correction, and he's been throwing pretty well. I really like him tonight. What about you?
Yeah, that was one of the things I talked about before this season. I think we talked about it before the first show here on the Pivot for MLB, is why I like Gio Gonzalez over the course of this season, because of just how high, rather. It's a different kind of tongue twister there, but all I can think of is that movie now, right? How High?
Yeah, Method Man and Red Man.
Well, yeah, I think that the problem for me with Gonzalez tonight was those Twins matchups with Dozier. Sano can hit lefties just as well as he pretty much hits righties, even though he is almost a reverse splits guy. But like you said, Torrey Hunter is not there anymore. Trevor Plouffe is hurt. He's not in the lineup right now. So a guy like Gonzalez, who is looking to improve on last season, where he didn't pitch badly, but like you said, his BABIP was really high, indicating that he was getting unlucky. Now, later on tonight, it's a little bit of a cliffhanger. I will talk about another pitcher who I think is getting a little bit too unlucky. But with you, just talking about Gio Gonzalez there, I don't think I'm going to be off him as much as I was earlier. The thing is, I didn't like him initially because of the fact that Felix Hernandez was not that much more expensive, and you're getting a much better pitcher. But the problem is, Felix is out. You have to trust somebody. So for me, I'm with you. I do think Gio Gonzalez has the potential to be a decent cash game play tonight because he does face that Twins team that gives up a likelihood to swinging strikes on changeups. And that's the one thing that Gonzalez has. It's an excellent changeup on the left side.
Yeah, so fantasydraft.com gives you a weather update now, and I think the one downside to him, which is kind of downside to Lester, is the weather. And this says showers are likely, so delay is probable. But what I'm getting from the weather now is that Gonzalez should make it through 5, 6, 7 innings before there's even any minor concern. So I think, looking at the weather for him might be overthinking it a bit. So Gonzalez definitely in play. I mean, Lester's an interesting one because, again, we've got weather in play, but the Reds have actually been hitting lefties really hard this year. I think they're top 6, 7-ish in WOBA. They haven't struck out very much, but it's such a limited sample size. I don't know if you could go on it. I mean, Joey Votto's amongst basically one of the not even basically. He's amongst the coldest streak of his entire career. He's at least 0 for his last 17 the last I looked. But no Billy Hamilton certainly helps. We mentioned that. He's stolen 8 bases in his last 2 games against Leicester. And, frankly, Leicester's just one of the safer pitching names on the slate. And I think he's got one of the safest skill sets. So, Nick, would you be willing to Leicester in cash?
I think I prefer to spend down just so I can fit the Coors bats. I'd pick the Coors bats over paying up for Leicester if I was given the choice between the two tonight. And just on FanDuel, I'm on a one-pitcher side, obviously. I think I'm leaning toward Aaron Sanchez of the Blue Jays against those A's. The A's don't strike out too much, but their WOBA against righties is near the bottom of the league. They don't hit homers. They don't hit for a bunch of power. I know Josh Reddick has some pop in his bat, but he's only one guy. But Aaron Sanchez throws a heavy fastball. He's striking out more guys this season than he did last year. He doesn't walk too many guys. I mean, I think he can go 7 innings. He's putting up a ton of good lines to start the season. So if I'm leaning anywhere on FanDuel tonight, it's Aaron Sanchez at 6,700, and then I can fit any Coors Field bat I really want.
All right, Josh, let's talk 2 starting pitcher sites. I guess here are the other options. I like Matt Moore, and I haven't heard really anyone talking about him tonight. I think he might be even my second cash pitcher. You look at this Yankees team, 24th in weighted on base. They're in the bottom 10 of, runs created plus, ISO, average, hard hit percentage. The only things they do is walk a lot, but Matt Moore's control has been much better this year, and they're still striking out over 21%, but that ranks in the bottom 10 against lefties so far. That'll, obviously even out. We'll look at some teams in like the higher teens, but basically, strikeouts and walks are where they've been strong against lefties, but we saw Rich Hill strike out 10 of them last night, so I like him. So I guess the choices are Moore, Nola, who is facing a Brewers team that basically has no good hitters against righties, and I guess Sanchez. So do you like any of these guys for 2 starting pitcher sites?
Sanchez is the guy I would be looking for as my second starting pitcher. When the day started, he was my pairing with Felix Hernandez, but of course with that news, we have to change some things up. But the one thing is, if you move down from Hernandez and still use Sanchez, you're going to have more money to spend up on bats, and by bats we mean Coors bats, which we'll get to. But I do like Sanchez this season because he does have just a 1.35 ERA so far, a .85 WHIP, and he has 20 Ks in 20 innings. So as Nick mentioned, he does strike out guys a little bit, and despite a small sample, he has been very good. But to me, what's even more impressive was he shut down the likes of the Yankees and the Red Sox, who are actually 2 of the better offenses in the league in terms of talent. Some of them have been underperforming so far this season, but against righties, both those teams do have the ability to have some success. The only issue with me for Aaron Sanchez is that ballpark in Toronto. A lot of runs are being scored there, but for me, I think the runs are going to come from his team and the Jays tonight rather than on the other side, scoring runs against Sanchez. So for me, my second starting pitcher in cash is probably going to be Sanchez. But as you talked about with Matt Moore, he looks excellent this season, so I would not mind using him in tournaments, especially since he allows you to fit some of those top bats.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are pluses and minuses to Sanchez's matchup tonight. I mean, you got he's a guy who's struggled more so against lefties in his career, and the Oakland A's have loaded up the top 6 are either lefties or switch hitters. So it's Burns, Coghlan, Reddick, Lowry, Vogt, Coco Chris, then you get to the first righty, which is Davis, then Alonso, then Semien. So there's a lot of lefties against him. But that being said, with two of them being Jed Lowry and Coco Chris, I don't think it's too much of a concern. Same thing goes for Matt Moore. That Yankee lineup is kind of hit or miss, so I think he's interesting. The only other two starting pitchers, we kind of talked about Harvey, we kind of talked about Nola. Those are guys I'm looking for in tournaments. Do you guys have anything else to say about pitchers whatsoever?
Yeah, I like Nick Trapino a lot for the Angels late. He's dirt cheap on FanDuel too. He's 5,800, one of the cheapest pitchers on the slate tonight. And this Mariners team I like to target this lineup more against lefties. They don't scare me against righties. They're middle of the pack against righties and WOBA and strikeout percentage. So if you're playing like late slate and you don't have the option to use Sanchez or Aaron Nola, I like those two better for if I'm paying down. But on the late slate, I really like Trapino a lot tonight. I think he's got a lot better chance to get a win, especially with Hernandez scratched.
Yeah, and that Park is definitely pitcher friendly. The reason I kind of overlooked him is because I really like Robinson Cano tonight, but that's because his WOBA against lefties 356 this year. But I don't think that's the most difficult of lineups. So I agree with you. That was a guy I actually gazed over and I gave a second look to. Tropiano could be interesting. I agree with you though. He's probably better for like a split slate instead of overall. But let's move on to catcher and let's start with you, Josh. Let's get the Coors Kool-Aid flowing, as we say. Yasmani Grandal, got to be the play of the night at catcher, right?
Yeah, I love this guy. He's one of the better hitting catchers in the league when you watch him play. He was a decent hitter for the Padres, but really just did not have much protection. So when he moved over to the other team in California, Southern California, and the Dodgers, Grandal has been pretty good. And of course, he's going to be playing in Coors Field. I do like John Gray as a pitcher. Problem was, he was drafted by the Rockies, so that's pretty much a death wish for most pitchers, except for the fact of a guy like Jorge De La Rosa had one good year. But other than that, pretty much every pitcher struggles in Coors Field, and I don't think Gray is going to be a guy that has the potential to be lights out any night, especially tonight. And the one thing about Gray is even if he pitches well, he's not going more than 5 innings, and the Rockies' bullpen is terrible. So Grandal has a chance to get a ton of at-bats in a great ballpark. It's an 11-run game. And, hey, that guy can actually hit, too, which can't be said for the same way for all the other catchers in the Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's definitely, I don't know about a concern, but John Gray, first start off the DL, he's their top prospect, so they're not going to push him too far, which means with this Dodger lineup, we could see some lefty relievers later in the game. I don't know if that means that they would pull Grandal, but it's at least worth considering. I think Grandal's still fine. I think the matchup is great. I think the price is great pretty much everywhere, so I think he's in play. Nick, who do you like? Is it Grandal or bust, or do you have some other guys?
Definitely Grandal for cash. He's the most expensive catcher on FanDuel. I mean, I don't know how other sites work, but the FanDuel just jacks up the price for everyone that plays in Coors. I don't know. Does DraftKings and Fantasy Draft do that too?
Usually, I must say.
Not today, though. It's weird.
Not today, especially for Dodgers.
Yeah, he's super high priced, 3,700, easily most expensive catcher on the slate. But I can fit him if we're going to play these cheap starting pitchers. But if I'm going for tournaments, I like the two catchers in that Pirates Diamondbacks game, Wellington Castillo and Francisco Cervelli, both facing lefties, both hitting the heart of the order. We talked about Cervelli last time we were on Wednesday against lefties. He's high WOBA, high walk rate, good average, bats in the middle of the order. Wellington Castillo as well, bats in the middle of the order. Big pop. He's starting to heat up a little bit, so I like both those guys if I'm looking after Grandal.
Yeah, you kind of just ran down my list. So, Josh, I don't know if you want to comment on them, but those were the guys that I have, and I don't really like much else.
Yeah, that's the same I had, Grandal, Cervelli, myself. So I think we're all on the same page for catcher.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend any more time there because there are so many bats tonight. Let's move on to first base. And I just want to, I'm going to start with Adrian Gonzalez because he's in that game, but I want to kind of mention an observation is that John Gray, in a limited sample, mind you, it's only 40 2/3 innings, has given up a much higher weighted on base to right-handed hitters. So we're going to talk about Grandal, we're going to talk about Gonzalez, we're going to talk about all these other guys, but maybe we want to focus on the right-handed Dodgers. With that being said, I think Adrian Gonzalez is a no-brainer. Do you agree? Let's start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I'm locking Adrian Gonzalez in no-brainer in cash as well. I've been harping on this. I'm going to stack this Coors Field game for the most part. I'm not going to go totally all in on it, but Gonzalez is heated up in that Atlanta series. Hit a home run, had a couple hits. So I think he's starting to find his swing a little bit. So I'm locking him in for cash and kind of just moving on to the next position for cash wise. And we'll talk about these tournament options after you guys talk about cash as well.
Yeah, Josh, why don't you give us your cash thoughts?
I hate to use a cliche, but that's exactly what Paul Goldschmidt is against lefties. This guy has been unbelievable pretty much his entire career in a sample, including this season and last. He has a ridiculous 452 WOBA and a 256 isolated power rating. Goes against Nice, who is not a bad pitcher, but in this particular game, I really like Goldschmidt at first base because he has not been elite this year. So he's a little bit cheaper, but getting a matchup against a lefty, I do think he's going to be lower owned with all the other people on those Coors bats. So I think he's a decent option for me in cash games. And you are going to differentiate yourself, and I think that is important in GPPs. But for cash, it is as well, especially in Coors Field, because a guy like Adrian Gonzalez is very likely to be a success. But if not, you have one of the best talents in baseball at first base.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder there. Goldschmidt's going to be the guy who's going to be my bold call. I really like him. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the other options, and let's get into tournaments. I mean, Goldschmidt against a lefty, I think, it's been too long. He's been quiet too long this year. It's about time he broke out. I mean, we forget that last year it was the talk of who's the best hitter between him, Harper, and Mike Trout. So he is phenomenal. He's going to get going. I mean, losing Pollock at the top of the order probably hurt him a little bit, but he's still a stud, and I think tonight's a great night to use him in Chase Field. But other tournament options, assuming the weather holds, and it looks like it's going to, Anthony Rizzo and pretty much the whole Cubs offense against John Moscott. I think he's terrible, honestly. I think he's probably the worst pitcher on the slate, frankly. He's been bad as a minor leaguer. He's been bad as a major leaguer. So I'm targeting the Cubs bats. They're what I like to call the Blue Jays of the National League. And Josh, I'll let you go from there in terms of our tournament first baseman.
I really like Chris Davis tonight. I don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about that offense, of course, with the Coors Field, both teams on that side, and we're going to talk about the Rays offense, who has an excellent matchup as well tonight. But I think Chris Davis has a very, very high chance to hit a home run tonight against Chris Young, who has given up the most fly balls, basically, I think, in the history of the MLB, when you look at it. Fly ball rate hovers around 60%, which is absolutely ridiculous. We know about Chris Davis's numbers against righties, isolated power rating of over 350 over the last two seasons, this year included. So I think that's one of those things that you have to take a look at him, because they're a little bit cheaper than some of these other options. And on sites where they boost the prices for Coors, you're going to get a pivot to a guy like Chris Davis for the same price as a guy like Adrian Gonzalez would be. So it's definitely something you want to take a look at. And given the fact that Chris Young gives up a ton of fly balls, that's exactly what you want from a guy with an uppercut swing like Chris Davis, who has a ton of power.
What about you, Nick? What do you got for tournaments?
Yeah, I love all those guys you talk about, all in the same price range. So everyone's going to pick Gonzalez for cash and probably stack them in tournaments too. So all those guys are going to be super low owned. But I like Mark Reynolds a lot against a lefty, Scott Kazmir. His velocity was down in spring training. I don't know what he's been looking like this season, but I don't think he's a great pitcher against righties at all. And then Ryan Howard. I know you guys hate Ryan Howard a lot, but I love Ryan Howard for tournaments. He can hit a home run anytime he comes to the plate. Zach Davies is not a guy that scares me whatsoever. A great hitter's park for lefties especially. I mean, I think Ryan Howard's a great tournament play at 2,600 on FanDuel, super cheap.
I'm not going to disagree with you against Zach Davies. I'm not the world's biggest Ryan Howard fan, but I'm not going to argue against it here. Some other guys that I like who, we'll get to the stacks with them, but they're kind of in the middle of the stacks, are Lucas Duda against Norris, who's absolutely horrible against left-handers. Tyler White against Stephen Wright. I have a feeling, this knuckleballer at some point is bound to get just hammered, and this feels like it should be the game against a team with so much power. It's hard to ever tell. Either he's going to throw a good game or a bad one. I have a feeling a bad one's coming, so I think an Astros stack is very much in play. And then the other one comes from that stack that Collacchi and I love, and that's Tampa Bay against CC Sabathia. Steve Pearce, a career left-handed killer. I wish there weren't so much talent tonight because I'd love to use Steve Pearce and some of these other Rays bats in cash games. You just can't do it with cores. I think you can fit one or two of your favorites, but you definitely can't go multiples. So Steve Pearce, someone I think I got to leave for tournaments, even though I like the skills. Does anyone have anything else to say about first? All right, let's move on. Second base. Let's start with you, Josh. What do you got for us?
All of the Logan Forsythe tonight. He's hitting lead off against CC Sabathia, who has given up a ridiculous number of home runs, of base hits, of doubles. Of course, Logan Forsythe's isolated power rating against lefties is one of the highest in MLB. It's at 302, including this season and last season of a sample size. The WOBA's over 400. He's going to get the most at-bats on that Rays team against Sabathia. And we know about Sabathia's WOBA and isolated power allowed to righties. But how about he's allowed over a 300 batting average, too? So that's basically a 1 in 3 chance to get a hit. And, of course, combining that with the slugging percentage he allows and things of that nature, he makes for a fantastic play. And the one thing I do like about Forsythe, of course, is we talk about those Coors bats. And in slates like these, when you can pivot from those Coors bats, a lot of people will be using LeMahieu at a similar price because he's leading off in a Coors Field game. So a guy like Forsythe with his upside are going to have a ton of opportunity to bring you up those the cash lines and bring you up those tournament lines in your FanDuel and DraftKings lineup simply because he's going to be far too low owned with the consideration of his matchup and his power.
Yeah, this Tampa lineup, very enticing all the way through. Nick, who do you like at second? And I guess, what's your thought on the Tampa stack? Because you've been kind of quiet on that front.
Yeah, I love Forsythe. My only concern is I don't know about this weather. Like, I don't know what the weather update is for New York. My concern is if we get a delay early and then CC Sabathia doesn't come back out. Then the Yankees bullpen gets the rest of the game, which is a good bullpen. So I'm a little concerned there. But I mean, I love this Rick. I love Souza. Souza's probably going to be in my bold calls later, so I'll leave that later. But I love this whole right-handed heavy stack for the Rays as well. I'm with you guys on that. So Forsythe for cash if I get some clearance on the weather. If not, I'm leaning LeMahieu over Utley. LeMahieu has no power whatsoever, but he's a doubles machine in that park, so he can still rack up fantasy points pretty quickly.
It's looking like the postponement threat is low. The threat for delays in the game low to moderate for that Rays game. So I think we're looking good to go there. Let's go to tournaments. I think even Chase Utley could be in play for cash, certainly. I mean, this Dodgers team, we've kind of harped on it, but I'll start with a different guy. I like Scooter Gennett a little bit. I think you could either go one of two ways on Nola. It's either you're on board and you're using him, or you're off board, and he hasn't exactly been great so far. And in his career, 342 WOBA against left-handers. I haven't seen that Brewer lineup yet. I'm gonna Google it right now. Here we go. Gennett hitting second, which is what I thought he would be. So I'm going to lock him in there for tournaments. As we mentioned, everyone's going to be on cores, and there's certainly going to be cores hitters that get it done. But what if we get one of those, 4 to 3 cores games, and only 2 guys hit 2-run homers or something, and there's not much else production? I mean, I think this is a night to kind of pick your cores hitters and pair them with guys that you feel good about at other positions. I think Forsythe and I think Gennett are my guys at second. Let me give the floor back to you, Nick. Who do you like for tournaments?
Jonathan Scope. Collacchi mentioned earlier how Chris Young's a super heavy fly ball pitcher. Got super lucky last season. Scope matches righties. I know he's kind of cold right now. He's cooling off, but he's got a couple homers in the past week. I love him against righties. He bats toward the bottom of the lineup, so no one's ever on Scope, so he's a great tournament option. And then I like Josh Harrison for the Pirates. He's starting to find his swing a little bit, facing a lefty Patrick Corbin, I know he's pitching better this season, I believe, but he got lit up pretty decently. He got lucky last season, so I like Harrison a lot too, if he's leading off.
Collacchi, let's go to you, and maybe you can explain to me why the last name Schoop is pronounced Scope and not Shoop.
If you're going to ask me about pronunciation or spelling, we're just going to take everybody down a road we don't want to go. So we should just kind of end that where we are and stay ahead. The one guy I do like at second base tonight in tournaments is Neil Walker. The thing is, on FanDuel, if you're playing there, he's the same price within $100 or two of Logan Forsythe, Scooter Gennett, and Howie Kendrick, who plays in Coors. So a lot of the people will literally just skip right over a guy like Walker, but you have to remember this guy has an excellent matchup tonight against Bud Norris, who has allowed a WOBA of almost 400 to opposing right-handed hitters or left-handed hitters, which Neil Walker is a switch hitter, a 547 slugging to lefties. And the one thing about Walker is this guy's 7 for his last 14. Now, a lot of people won't talk about hot streaks, but I think that's baloney. Guys that are on fire in baseball, we all played the game. We understand that sometimes you're just seeing the ball better. And I don't think they mean they're hot or not. It just means you're more confident. And in baseball, confidence brings great things. We've seen it with Bryce Harper striking out less than the amount of home runs he's hit. So I think Neil Walker's in a solid position tonight as a tournament option if you want to go contrarian.
Yeah, I think at the end of this show we should probably talk about our favorite stacks and kind of order them because I think we all have a bunch of teams that we like, and for our listener purposes, we probably want to make some sense of it because there's like 6 stacks that I like, and I know probably the same for you guys. So at the end, we'll cover that, but definitely one of them that we're looking at. Let's move on to third base since we're about halfway through. I'll start with you, Josh. For me, you can go, obviously, Nolan Arenado. I mean, I think he's going to be popular tonight. I think Justin Turner is arguably the best play on the slate, but the guy who I've got as kind of the contrarian-ish cash play to him is Evan Longoria, man, against CC Sabathia. I know BVP isn't really what we look at, but this one's hard to overlook. I mean, he's homered 6 times off Sabathia, and he's got the splits, and they're in Yankee Stadium. So for me, I think, on DraftKings, when everyone's Turnering or Arenadoing, I think Longoria is the spot where I'm going to differentiate. What do you think?
I really like a lot of third basemen tonight. You mentioned Arenado. You mentioned guys like Evan Longoria, who I also love as well. He's my top third baseman. But how about Matt Carpenter as a lefty going against Cashner? How about Manny Machado going against Chris Young, a fly ball pitcher? And even Josh Donaldson can be mentioned because he could be mentioned every night. So tonight's a night at third base where it's going to be extremely interchangeable in terms of getting your top GPP plays. So do not be afraid to fade Nolan Arenado or Justin Turner in tournaments because there are a ton of great options at third base. For me, in addition to Longoria, who we don't need to touch on again because Ricky just mentioned him, I like Todd Frazier a lot tonight in GPP because of the way that he hits left-handed pitching. This guy's never going to hit over 300 again, I don't think. I don't know if he's going to hit over 240, but the guy has a ton of power. Isolated power rating last year against lefties was a 331, which is really astronomical. Half of that is a good isolated power rating, and he has 331, which is just really insane. That's up with the numbers of Bryce Harper against Julio Teheran just in that sample. So it's really incredible how well he hits lefties. And in a game where he has potential to be under 3% owned, he's a very solid tournament option.
Yeah, this is an insane night because I remember writing last night, and the first thing I said was Manny Machado is an absolute must-play. And I just named 3 third basemen to start this off, and he wasn't one of them. Now, this is why I really like playing on Fantasy Draft tonight. I think it's a perfect night for them to run the big tournament because I think for my cash game, I'm going to have at least 3 third basemen in there. I think I'm going to have Machado, I think I'm going to have Longoria, and I think I'm going to have Turner. So on the site to say you have to pick one, Nick, which one are you going with? Because there's a whole lot to choose from.
Out of those guys, I'd probably lean Longoria. Just the BVP, everything. Just he marks all the boxes, like Collacchi likes to say. So I love Longoria for cash. But I was actually looking at someone even lower price than him, Brandon Drury for the Diamondbacks, batting second against John Neese in that Diamondbacks lineup. They have the second highest implied total, not counting Coors game, so behind the Rays, so close to 5 runs tonight is their implied total, and he's batting second. Career 314 hitter against lefties across 36 plate appearances, 419 WOBA, 343 ISO, 3 home runs and 36 plate appearances. So I think he's a great play if you're trying to save some money and just load up on heavy bats tonight.
And what about for tournaments then? If you're saving money in cash, does that mean you're going to do the opposite in tournaments, or do you like him for both?
I kind of like Chris Bryant for tournaments, actually. I think people will be off him just because it's a righty-righty matchup. People just don't play righty-righties, I don't think. And John Moscott, like you talked about earlier, is just complete trash, and Bryant's on fire right now.
Yeah, 2 homers. Was it last night? I mean, the guy's just a stud. Mosket again. I mean, I've got 6 stacks written down. The Cubs are definitely amongst them. Collacchi, what about you? What do you like for tournaments? We've named a bunch of them already, so maybe you can make some sense of where these guys should be played.
I think one guy to take a look at third base that maybe go a little bit underowned, that kind of had been a theme in my research today, is Alex Rodriguez against Matt Moore. We talked about how good Matt Moore has looked, and that is definitely for sure. But in New York Yankees Stadium, where it's very short porch to left and right, one bad pitch from Moore could end up in the seats, and that's what Alex Rodriguez has been doing his entire career. He still has excellent numbers against lefties. I think he had an isolated power rating of over 280 last year. So it's an excellent way to kind of differentiate your lineups at third base. And he is a little bit cheaper, just $3,200 on FanDuel, so you just spend up money elsewhere. So maybe this is a night that you pay up for pitching to be contrarian, and I think A-Rod would be a good way to help out with that.
Yeah, I think third base tonight for me, I'm going to be chalky. Even with tournaments, I think I'm going to have a 3-man rotation of Longoria, Machado, and Turner. If that means I have to fade Arenado, then shall be it. He kind of faded down the stretch last year against lefties. He's a righty who favors hitting righties, kind of like Manny Machado. And we've talked about Chris Young giving it up. Manny Machado hitting over 400. So the 3 of them for me for all formats. I don't care, if I'm doing a different stack or something like that. I think I want those guys in my lineup. So does anyone else have anything to say about third? All right, let's move on to shortstop. Nick, let's get started with you. What do you like tonight?
Obviously, the 2 guys in Coors, Trevor Story and Corey Seager. Both of them seem to be ice cold right now, though, and they strike out a ton. Seager not as much, but Story is striking out an extremely high clip right now. I can't pay $5,000 for that guy on FanDuel, even in this great spot. So I'd kind of lean Seager at $4,900 cheaper than Story on FanDuel tonight, and he's batting second, great spot. It's a righty coming off the DL and John Gray. But if I'm not looking at those guys, I like Gene Segura and that lefty against the lefty and Johnson, that Diamondback stack I've been talking about. And then Tim Beckham. Is Tim Beckham in the starting lineup tonight?
Yeah, he's hitting. I think he's hitting 8th.
Yeah, I like him for tournament slot. He crushes lefties. I just don't know if he's going to get more than 3 at-bats, and I want more than that. So I like him for tournaments, so he can hit one over that left field wall for sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to go over the obvious. I mean, Story and Seager, I'll let Josh talk about them. But I will say one name that stands out for me to both DraftKings and on Fantasy Draft, if you want to spend up at pitcher, is Daniel Castro. I think I'd probably only do it on DraftKings for cash because he's hitting second against Matt Harvey, who's been struggling. But he's the absolute minimum in terms of cost. That's the only reason I like him. And Zach Cozart for tournaments. I know we're talking cash right now, but I'm going to get ahead of myself. Against John Lester, the one thing we know about Lester is if a guy gets on, they're probably going to steal, since Lester allowed, I think, 44 stolen bases, which was by far the most last year. Cozart favors hitting lefties, so both him and Suarez could be in play. But Cozart for tournaments, if you don't believe in this John Lester start, you believe in this Reds offense, I think is a good way to differentiate. But Collacchi, let's go to you to talk about some of the other guys. Let's start with Cash, because I really did get ahead of myself.
Well, cash games tonight, a lot of people were just going to have these core shortstops and Trevor Story or Corey Seager. But I'm with Nick. I can't pay that much money for Trevor Story because it comes with opportunity costs. You're going to pay $5,000 for Trevor Story when you can get a guy like Carlos Correa or even Bryce Harper a little bit more expensive at a different position. I can't. And the thing for Seager, Seager's 3 for his last 29. Now, I know Coors Field is a place for hitters, and it definitely increases their chances to get fantasy points. But 3 for 29 is not very good at all. I know we talk about whether or not hot and cold streaks are real. 3 for 29's got to be real. 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 1 for 4, 1 for 4, and then he went 0 for his next 9 before getting a hit. So it's something that to look at. Young players do struggle a lot, and then they press. So for me, I'm not going to be paying up for shortstop at either one of these guys. I actually like Javier Baez tonight, hitting 6th. This guy's got a ton of talent, just hasn't figured it out yet. But a guy that's basically the minimum everywhere, hitting 6th in a good lineup against a pretty bad pitcher. For me, that's definitely worth the price because I don't really like any other shortstops, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with Seager just because of the ballpark. I've been That's the guy who's been, the fool me once, shame on me, fool me once, shame on whatever, however that saying goes. I've been fooled by him like 10 times this year because, he's got those big splits in a limited time from last year, so his numbers jump off the page and he's done nothing. But for me, Corey Seager for cash, at 4,100 on DraftKings, 8,000 on Draft, it's exposure to Coors at a reasonable price. So that's how the way I feel about that. Do any of you guys have anything else to say about shortstops for tournaments?
Yeah, the only other two guys that made my list were Jordy Mercer. If he's batting leadoff or anywhere in the top six, I'd like to play him. He's a lefty killer. And then Elvis Andrus is batting second against Jose Quintana. He's batting over 400 his last 7 games. Has a hit in 9 of his last 10. He doesn't hit for power, obviously. Maybe he can get a couple extra base hits, but I like him in that 2-hole tonight too.
Yeah, and Jose Quintana, if you notice, was not a guy that we mentioned. I like the Rangers against lefties, even though they've got a decent amount of lefties in their lineup. Chu being hurt certainly dims that down a little bit, but they still have, Mazzara, who I don't think is playing tonight, Fielder, guys like that, so it wouldn't seem like they'd be good, but they are really good against lefties. So Anderson, the second hole, only assures that it's a tough matchup for Quintana. Let's go to outfield. Let's start with cash, because I have one guy for tournaments that I'm pretty passionate about that I don't think will be on either of your lists. But Nick, let's start with you for cash games, because there's a lot tonight.
Yeah, there's so many options, so many ways to go. But the first guy I plugged in was Dexter Fowler. This dude is just on fire right now, an on-base machine, walks, hits, whatever you want, steals bases. I mean, hitting first in that lineup, like you talked about, the best lineup in the National League against John Moscott. Plug and play for him. I don't care what his price is, really. He's still under 4,000 on FanDuel, so I'm loving Dexter Fowler tonight.
Yeah, I think his on base, at least I saw it tweeted at some point last night, was 530. I don't know if he finished the night with that, but I think it was through his second at bat. It was that high. So for cash games, the guy's getting on base. That's all but assured, and then the guys behind him are probably going to drive him in. So Dexter Fowler was one of my stone cold locks for cash. Again, I'm trying really hard not to just go all Coors, so he's kind of an easy choice, not in Coors. Josh, what do you got for us?
On FanDuel, Dexter Fowler is the same price as Jock Peterson. So all those guys taking Jock Peterson in cash batting 8th, I don't necessarily recommend it. I don't like guys hitting 6 or lower in cash games. But that's a great pivot, 3,800, the same price. You get a Coors bat at 8th, or a guy like Dexter Fowler, who is, I believe, he's 7 for his last 16 with a ton of runs scored at the same price. So I'm going to be taking him in cash. Also, really like the Mets outfielders, Yoenis Cespedes, Michael Conforto, and Curtis Granderson. I think Granderson's probably just tournament only. But Yoenis Cespedes is a reverse splits hitter. He has one of the only uppercuts from a right-handed batter in the MLB, and he's facing a reverse splits pitcher in Bud Norris, although he does struggle against both sides. Also like Conforto, who's hitting 3rd again. I believe the Mets are going to be sticking with him in that spot, and that's an excellent reason to continue using him in DFS, as he is still cheap. Bud Norris is terrible against lefties, terrible against righties as well. So those Mets outfielders for me are going to be a target for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some of the other names I have for cash, I like Denard Span leading off. I like Bryce Harper. I mean, how do you not like this guy every night? I'm not a big believer in Kyle Gibson's skill set. I know he was one of their top pitching prospects, supposed to be an ace kind of guy, at least they said. But, I mean, this is a guy who's 20 percentage points higher in terms of weighted on base. He's given up to lefties, and Bryce Harper can hit obviously anyone. But I do prefer to use him against righties as opposed to lefties. Even though he hits lefties, I just feel more comfortable with it. I don't know why. Maybe that's a flaw in my daily fantasy game, but I love using Harper against the righties. Some other guys that we haven't mentioned, Ryan Rayburn. I haven't checked out that Rockies lineup yet, but it would be hard to believe that he wouldn't be in it. Here we go. We got a Rockies lineup. He is hitting 7th, so maybe outside of the cash consideration. But for me, the skill set is so good that I might still do it because the other options would be LeMahieu, who I think had 4 extra base hits against lefties all last year, Arenado, whose WOBA was around like 320 or 330, or Mark Reynolds, who's kind of an all-or-nothing guy. So it's either pay way up for Trevor Story or go down to Rayburn, who's hitting 7th. And this might be an exception for me because we're talking about a guy with like a 420 weighted on base average last year against lefties. So I definitely like him. And I'm going to focus on Coors for cash. Yasiel Puig hitting fifth. We talked about those reverse splits for John Gray. So while everyone's on, Adrian Gonzalez, Jock Peterson, Seager, that kind of thing, I'm going to focus on Puig and Turner as my two top guys. Probably mix in another, Dodger bat or two. But those are the guys that I like, are the righties. Josh, I agree with you in terms of the Mets bats. I was going to go there for tournaments, but I think Granderson's basically an elite cash play. I wish I could play 10 outfielders today. I mean, it's kind of the same thing like third base, that Granderson and Fowler were the first two names that stood out, but then you got Coors. So, Josh, let's go to you for tournaments now, since there are so many names. I think we've pretty much hit on the ones that I like most, but there are a couple others out there who are probably a decent shot for a homer.
Yeah, I love Steven Souza tonight. I think all of us do. This guy has a great matchup against CC Sabathia. The guy's got a ton of power. He's under 3,000 on FanDuel, and I think his price is just around 3,300 or something on DraftKings as well. So this guy has a great chance to hit a home run. And if you are stacking the Tampa Bay Rays, do not forget to put in Souza, even if he hits 6, which I think he may be doing. So he's one of my top options there. And I also like Ryan Braun. There's something about this guy that he just crushes the ball on Fridays. Is that right, Ricky?
That is right. Ryan Braun, the Hebrew man, always gets it done on Shabbat.
That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. And the one thing about Aaron Nola is he does throw a lot of curveballs earlier in the count. How many times have we seen Braun wait on a curveball and hit the ball about 450 feet? I think that could happen tonight. And honestly, a guy like Braun is on fire of late. I think he has 2 home runs in the last week. He has at least 2 hits in 3 of his last 4 games, and he is 7 for his last, do his quick math here, 7 for his last 13 with 3 runs scored. So the guy's on fire. He's facing a struggling pitcher. He has that thing on Fridays, and he gets a good ballpark too. So he's an excellent elite option for me in tournaments as well.
Yeah, Collacchi, let's talk about that about that Rays lineup for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But if you're stacking them, you can use 6 guys on Fantasy Draft, 5 guys on DraftKings, right? I think the logical guy to leave out would be Dickerson hitting 4th, right? Because then, even if you're going 5 guys, you can go Forsythe, Longoria, Pierce, Souza, I think are the top 4 in terms of priority, at least for me. I even think Tim Beckham and Casale are worth a shot at the bottom of the lineup. So if I'm skipping guys to try and make that Rays stack work, I think it's Geyer, who's 1 for 20 against CC Sabathia in his career, and I think it's Dickerson hitting 4th. What do you think about that? What would you do if you're Rays stacking?
Yeah, Dickerson's the guy that I am skipping as well, heading 4th. Now, it sucks because the 4th spot is literally what brings the stack together in most lineups, so this is a bit contrarian. But I think lefty on lefty, there's no need to do that when you can have guys like Steven Souza, who's hitting 7th. Geyer hitting 2nd if you don't like to look at BBP numbers, as he is 1 for 20. But also Desmond Jennings in the 5-hole too. So you can go a decent middle-of-the-order stack there with Evan Longoria, with with Desmond Jennings hitting 5th, and then Souza 7th. So I think there's a lot of different ways to go in that lineup. You can even go a reverse stack, which means a lot of guys like to go 8, 9, 1, 2, because there are some good good hitters at the bottom of that lineup too. But for me, I don't think you can leave out Souza or Evan Longoria in a stack. So I would probably split it up a little bit, maybe go 3, 5, 6, 7.
I don't think you can leave out Pierce or Forsythe either, honestly. I think that's got to be your main 4. And then the other guys are interesting. I mean, Casale hit 10 homers in 38 games last year, so he's clearly got some pop hitting 9th. Nick alluded to Beckham hitting 8th, so they've got a whole bunch to like there. I love this Rays team. I really hope they score like 10 runs tonight. It would be a great night here. But Nick, I'm going to throw it to you, but I'm going to lead off with a tournament guy that I really like because when it comes to the knuckleball, I like to go over to the batter versus pitcher data, and I haven't seen this Astros lineup yet. Let me just confirm that the guy I'm about to tell you is in the lineup. Otherwise, it's all for nothing. And it is not all for nothing. Beautiful. We've got Carlos Gomez hitting 7th, and I don't think that's a guy that a lot of people are going to look to, but you look at these numbers versus R.A. Dickey, and I know it's not Stephen Wright, but first of all, the Astros team 337 lifetime off Dickey, so they can clearly hit a knuckleball. Second of all, Carlos Gomez, 7 for 13 with a homer, 538, 571, 769 slash. Now, it's only 13 at bats, but that's a lot of hits. What do you think about Carlos Gomez, first of all, since I'm kind of just throwing a name at you, and second of all, go into your guys in the outfield?
Yeah, I didn't even think about Carlos Gomez whatsoever, honestly, but I'm not going to argue with it. You looked at the data, and if it's pointing in direction he can hit a knuckleball, then I'm all about it, especially batting seventh. Nobody's going to be on him whatsoever. But one Astros outfielder I was looking at was definitely Colby Rasmus batting cleanup against Stephen Wright. I mean, like Collacchi just alluded to, cleanup hitters bring it all together. Colby Rasmus is on fire right now. I love that play for tournaments. He's getting a little pricey, but he's shown he can hit the ball out of the ballpark any night. So I like him a lot. And then I like your boy that you alluded to last time we were on Wednesday, Odubel Herrera. I don't know what he did on against Bartolo Colon, but I know he got out the first at bat. I watched that at bat, and then I didn't see what he did the rest of the
I
night. But
think
I
he
like
got
him
on base
tonight.
twice. I think he had 2 walks, I think, or hit by a pitch or something. But I think he had 4 fantasy points. It wasn't great.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he's an on-base machine right now. I think he's like near the top of the league in walks right now. And against Zach Davies, I'm not scared of that guy, like I alluded to earlier with Ryan Howard. So I like Herrera batting in the leadoff spot in the hitter's park. That's one guy. And then I like at the right side of that Detroit lineup in the outfield, JD Martinez and Justin Upton. They crush righties. They're reverse splits hitters. Josh Tomlin, I believe, off the top of my head, might be a reverse splits pitcher from what
He
I
is.
was
He
looking
is.
at earlier in the season. Okay, so I like those guys a lot for tournaments as well.
Yeah, the only other thing that I have for tournaments, we've covered most of it. I mean, I just want to harp on the Mets that Michael Conforto hitting third is way too cheap. You compare him with Granderson and Cespedes, but I think my priority is Granderson and Cash and Conforto in tournaments, and then more of the Cubs. I mean, Jason Hayward hitting second against Moscat, who's a friggin' dumpster fire. Zobrist fifth, and then we already alluded to Fowler. So I think completing that Cubs stack is definitely in it. Let's talk. Unless you got any, let me go to you, Kalachi. Do you have any other outfielders before we get to stacks?
The other guy I was going to talk about that I didn't talk about yet was Rayburn, but we alluded to him earlier. So I think we're all basically on the same guys in the outfield. The only other name I wanted to throw in there, maybe thrown on the back burner a little bit, but I think Kristen Yelich is an excellent cash option as well, because he basically has a hit in every game since he was 3 years old. That's how on fire this guy is.
Yeah, he's been a staple for me since I got on that trend, like game 4 or 5, that the guy just wouldn't stop hitting. So Yelich is a guy I always look at for cash. Tonight, I kind of overlooked him, I'm not going to lie, but I can't argue there. Let's get to, before bold calls, let's just go over the stacks because on my list, the top 6 priorities, and I know not everyone makes 6 lineups, are Mets, Astros, Rays, Dodgers, Cubs, and Rockies. And I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to give a top 3 of ones that I think that people should use. I think my number 1 for tournaments is going to be the Rays. I think they are just such a rock solid bet. I think number 2 is going to be the Cubs, and number 3 is going to be the Dodgers, with the Astros as a close 4. I think you can leave out the Mets and Rockies tonight in terms of importance, but those are my priorities. Josh, what do you think about priorities in terms of stacks?
The top 3 I'm looking at tonight, number 1 is Tampa Bay, of course, like you just mentioned. I just think they have too much power against lefties in a great matchup against Sabathia. Number 2, I really like the New York Mets, the middle of that order against the Atlanta Braves and Bud Norris. And that third stack, of course, people mentioned Coors, but we don't need to talk about that. My third stack is actually a little bit quieter. I really like the Diamondbacks tonight. I just think that they put something together. I do like John Neese as a pitcher, but something about that ballpark and Chase Field, Paul Goldschmidt in the middle of that order, something tells me that Diamondback stat's really going to be on fire tonight.
What about you, Nick?
Yeah, me and Kalachi are pretty much on the same page, just a little different order. I like the Tampa Bay first, Arizona second, and then the Mets third. I'm not even going to talk about Coors. We already know what to do with Coors, so.
Yeah. And I really hope that it's a night that Coors doesn't win at all. I mean, I hate those nights. They're just,
Yeah,
as
they're just
Kalachi would
not
say,
fun.
they're so snooze.
Yeah. I hope it's a night. I mean, we've been waiting for it for about 8 years, but I'm hoping maybe it's a 1-0 night at Coors Field. Not saying pick a pitcher, but I just hope that happens.
Yeah, I might throw Casimir into one lineup and just pray because it'll be so different. But I don't know. I know Coors is the play, we all do, but it just makes it really boring when it actually turns out to be, and it's a 12-11 game, and you've got all these Rays stacks and other spots that are better, and it's just the atmosphere helped them out. It's annoying. But let's get to our bold call since we only got 5 minutes left. I think I'm going to change mine around, but I'm not going to start with me. I'm going to start with you, Kalachi. So why don't you give us your bold call?
All right, it's a little bit different, but I definitely think it's something people need to hear. My bold call tonight is Matt Harvey will begin to turn it around, and I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people have been looking at it and they say, oh, he just doesn't look right. He's giving up hits. He's giving up runs. Let's just go through some numbers real quick, and we'll talk about why I think he is due for some big-time progression. His K per nine is down, 4.6. Walks per nine is up. Strikeout rate is way down. But let's look at some other numbers here and why it means he should come back, and I think it starts tonight against that Braves team. He's allowed a 328 batting average on balls in play, which is over 100 points higher than his career average. That indicates he's been getting unlucky. He has a 58.6 left on base percentage, which is almost 20% lower than his average, which means guys that are getting on base are scoring. That indicates progression. I haven't even talked about the rest of it. 51% ground ball rate, which is higher than his average for his career. A soft hit percentage, which means of all batted balls, 32% of these batted balls off Harvey have been softly hit. That is a huge number. It's one of the best in baseball, and I don't think it's justifiable to say his ERA of 5.7 is the way that he's pitched. And to back that up, his FIP, fielder independent pitching, is 3.96. So this guy is pitching much, much better than the numbers believe. I think he's going to start to come back tonight, and you'll see a trend of old Harvey coming up in the next few weeks.
This is a bit of a breaking news. Danielle, how do you say your last name? Kozlowski?
Yeah.
Yeah, at Weather DFS, she was tweeting, and I do a million things at once while on this show, but she tweeted, I'll read it exactly so I don't screw it up. Once these storms move through Cincy, we should be good to go. I asked her, are they moving through prior to the game? She says, yes, game doesn't start for another hour, so if anything, it might be a late start, but not by much. So to me, that moves up not only John Lester, but the hitters. They all sound safe now, and that's why I'm changing my bold call on the fly that I think we get 2 homers from Anthony Rizzo tonight. I was going to do it for Goldschmidt, but I'll just go with a double. I'm going to say 2 homers for Anthony Rizzo and 3 times on base and a homer for Goldschmidt. That's where I'm going for my bold calls. I love them both at first while everyone's focused on Adrian Gonzalez, and for good reason in cash. I think these are going to be the ones winning you GPPs. Let's go to Nick. Let's go to Nick first before we get the guy on the beach. Nick, give us a bold call.
I was gonna call my shot and say Steven Souza hits a home run, but that's not too bold now these days. Now that we've talked about it, but I'm gonna go with the Pirates as a dark horse stack, and the Diamondbacks and Pirates combined for at least 12 runs.
All right, let's go to the guy that sounds like he's in the middle of a tornado. Let's cut live to Benny on the least tropical beach I've ever seen. Benny, welcome, and what do you got for us for a bold call?
Yo, it is windy as hell out here, man. I can't even keep my hat on right now. But I'm gonna go against my fandom tonight. Matt Moore's gonna have a big game. Logan Forsythe's going yard. So stack up all the Tampa Bay bats and take the Tampa Bay pitching, and you're gonna win all the money tonight because the Yankees suck right now.
There you go.
That was the greatest thing I've ever seen in the history of the pivot.
Benny live from the beach from Inception, it looks like. You guys have seen that?
Yeah, honestly, it's windy as hell right now out here. It's about to start raining too, so I gotta get the kids inside.
Benny in limbo, thanks for joining us. You might want to make sure if that thing's spinning or not so to know if you can come back to reality. But well done, Benny, with the bold call. I love Matt Moore. That is going to do it for us. We're a little early, but let's get our business out of the way. Again, that free roll today, use all of our plays in it, rotocurve.com/free roll. We got the big tournament on Fantasy Draft. We've kind of alluded that it's a third baseman kind of night. $22 refund promo. Click it. It's on RotoCurve everywhere at the top of your page. It's been a fun show, as it always is on Friday. Guys, you have any last words?
Benny just made my weekend. That was fantastic.
That was pretty incredible. Just a live call in. It was almost like a phone a friend. But
just kind of like wind just blew over my bold call, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Nick, what's your bold call? Oh man, that was great.
Oh, all right. That's all for us. Good luck tonight. We will talk to you next time.